Imagine walking into an apartment, right? You're a police officer, expecting a typical assault scene. But what you find instead is something straight out of a nightmare. A man covered in blood who calmly tells you he's just eaten the victim's brain with butter. This isn't some twisted horror movie. This is the reality of the Peter Bryan case. And that's what we're diving into today.
It's a case that stays with you, and what's even more disturbing is that it's not just about the gruesomeness, right? It's about the system failures that allowed it all to happen. So we're going to delve into the life of Peter Bryan, explore his mental state, the complexities of it, and examine the mental health system and how it failed to protect both him and the public.
It all began in London in 1969. Peter Bryan, the youngest of seven, was born into a seemingly ordinary family. But early on, there were signs that something wasn't quite right.
Yeah, his early life offers some clues, almost like breadcrumbs, trying to understand what went wrong. Even as a child, he exhibited this disturbing pattern of behavior, bullying classmates, demanding they tie his shoes, even sexually harassing female classmates. These actions, particularly the sexual harassment, suggest a real lack of empathy and a potential for escalating violence. It seems like it went unnoticed or unaddressed.
And it seems like as he got older, his behavior escalated. Petty theft, muggings, even a growing fascination with violence and power became a recurring theme. But alongside these behavioral issues, there's another factor that may have contributed to his downward spiral, and that's undiagnosed dyslexia.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting because Brian struggles with dyslexia. They weren't just a learning difficulty. They probably had a really profound psychological impact on him. Imagine a young boy, struggling to keep up in school, feeling inadequate, maybe even ashamed. This could have fueled a need for control, a need for dominance, leading him to seek power through aggression and violence.
School became a source of anxiety, of frustration for Bryan, and he ended up dropping out. And it seemed like this just exacerbated his existing problems.
Absolutely, because education can provide structure, purpose, a path to a brighter future. When that's disrupted, especially so young, it can leave someone feeling lost, disillusioned, making them vulnerable to negative influences.
And that brings us to the pivotal moment when Bryan's life and the lives of those around him took a tragic turn. He found part-time work with a family who owned a clothing boutique. Their daughter, Nisha Sheth, a kind young woman studying social work, was especially welcoming to him. But tragically, her kindness would be met with unimaginable brutality.
The murder of Nisha Sheth is just a chilling reminder of the darkest side of human nature. Brian, in a fit of rage, entered the shop and attacked Nisha with a hammer, inflicting these horrific injuries. He also assaulted her 12-year-old brother, who thankfully managed to escape and alert the authorities. But it's the brutality of the attack and the fact that it was directed at someone who had shown him kindness. That's what's so disturbing.
It's a horrific act that really defies any rational explanation. And what makes it even more disturbing is that after the attack, Bryan attempted suicide, jumping from a balcony. But even in this act of self-destruction, there was this chilling connection to his crime.
Right, this is where the psychological complexity comes in. At the hospital, while recovering, Brian kept muttering Nisha's parents' phone number over and over again. It's a seemingly insignificant detail, but it raises so many questions. Was it remorse? Was it a desperate attempt to reach out? Or was it something more sinister? A manifestation of his distorted reality.
It's a question that continues to haunt this case, and it's just the beginning of his descent into darkness. Descent that would expose the cracks in the very system designed to prevent such tragedies.
After Nisha's murder, Brian came face to face with the mental health system. He went through a series of evaluations, but the picture that emerged wasn't clear.
It seemed like the doctors were struggling, grappling with a puzzle they couldn't quite solve.
His thinking was fragmented, he showed signs of paranoia, and his perception of reality seemed distorted.
He claimed to have a loving relationship with Nisha, but her family vehemently denied it.
Right, and this delusional thinking, this inability to separate fantasy from reality, became a key feature in his diagnosis. But a definitive diagnosis, especially in such a complex case, was really a challenge.
So even with these red flags, the brutality of his crime, Bryan was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital, a high-security facility for the criminally insane.
And it was within Rampton that a new chapter in Brian's story began, a chapter marked by this disturbing mix of compliance and manipulation. On the surface, he seemed to be responding well to treatment, even showing remorse. But underneath, there were these whispers of something dark that lingered.
Staff reported violent outbursts, and even more concerning, his attitude towards women continued to be disturbing.
It seemed that even with medication and therapy, his misogyny remained a threat.
And this is where the cracks in the system become really apparent, don't they? Despite the warning signs, the history of violence, the persistent misogyny, the decision was made to transfer Bryan to a less restrictive environment, a halfway house.
It was a decision that, looking back, had catastrophic consequences.
You can almost feel the tension building, the sense of impending doom. How could someone with Bryan's history, someone who posed such a clear danger, be allowed back into society?
It's a question that haunts everyone involved in this case. There's no easy answer. It forces us to confront this balance between rehabilitation and public safety. Were the risks truly assessed? Were there pressures to move patients through the system, maybe because of limited resources, overcrowding?
And tragically, the worst fears of those who doubted the wisdom of Bryan's release were soon realized.
While at the halfway house, Bryan was accused of sexually assaulting a teenage girl. This incident, a chilling echo of his past, should have been a huge wake-up call.
But instead of being sent back to a secure facility, he was just transferred to a low-security ward with less restrictions.
It was a fatal miscalculation, a failure to recognize the depths of Bryan's depravity.
But in this less restrictive environment, he was given the freedom to plan and execute a crime that would shock even the most seasoned investigators.
It's where the story takes a truly horrifying turn, right? This is where the monster beneath the surface is fully revealed. Bryan, allowed to leave the ward unsupervised, purchased tools. A claw hammer, a box cutter, a screwdriver, tools that would soon be used in an act of unimaginable cruelty.
He then visited the apartment of an acquaintance, Bryan Cherry.
And what happened next is so gruesome, so disturbing, it almost defies belief. Bryan murdered Cherry, and then, driven by this twisted impulse, he engaged in an act of cannibalism, cooking and eating parts of Cherry's brain.
It's a crime that sends chills down your spine. It truly does.
When the police arrived, alerted by a friend of Cherry's who witnessed the scene, they found Bryan covered in blood, but instead of panic or remorse, what struck them was his calmness. He confessed to the crime, even directed them to the kitchen, where they found the evidence of his cannibalistic act.
And it's, in his words, the way he described his actions, that we see the true depths of his depravity. I ate his brain with butter, he said. It was very nice.
That utter lack of remorse, the nonchalant tone, it's bone-chilling.
It's a statement that stays with you, a haunting reminder of the capacity for evil that exists. But Bryan's reign of terror didn't end there.
Even after being sent back to a secure mental health facility, the darkness within him festered. He attacked another inmate, Richard Loudwell, who later died from his injuries.
And it's his chilling statement after this attack that truly reveals the depths of his depravity.
He said, "My only regret is that I was discovered before I had tasted his flesh."
It's hard to even imagine what goes through someone's mind to say something like that. It really highlights the complexities of human nature and the systems we have to deal with those who are, well, outside of what we consider normal.
Yeah, this final act of violence inside a secure facility, it just underlined the threat he posed. It wasn't a matter of if he would reoffend, but when. And it makes you wonder, was he beyond rehabilitation? Was the therapy, the medication, was it all just masking something deeper, a real sadism?
The public outcry after Bryan Cherry and Richard Loudwell's murders was huge. The spotlight was on the mental health system. People wanted to know how someone like Bryan, with his history, could slip through the cracks. And not just once, but multiple times.
The inquiry that followed was pretty damning. They highlighted inadequate care, not enough staff, missed warning signs. It seemed like chances to intervene, to reassess his risk, were missed at key moments.
But what I find really troubling is that despite all this, the report said no one was at fault. How can a system fail so badly without anyone being held responsible?
It's tough because it shows how hard it is to find accountability in mental health care. We want to avoid blaming individuals, but there needs to be accountability at the system level. If no one's responsible when things go wrong, how do we stop it from happening again?
It's a question that stays with you, even after the inquiry is over. In the end, Peter Bryan got 2 life sentences. The judge said he would never be released.
The judge, when he handed down the sentence, said something very chilling. He said Bryan killed because it gave you a thrill and a feeling of power when you ate flesh. That statement, coming from the judge, really emphasizes the danger Bryan represented. It wasn't just mental illness, there was something truly sadistic there. That made him a danger to everyone.
This case, it's a disturbing look into the darkest parts of humanity.
Yeah.
And it leaves us with more questions than answers. It forces us to think about the limits of rehabilitation, the balance between individual rights and public safety, and how the systems we rely on can fail.
What makes this case so unsettling is that it challenges how we think about human nature. It makes us acknowledge that evil is real, not just a concept, but something that can manifest in horrible ways.
It leaves you with this feeling of unease, this reminder that even in a society that wants progress and understanding, there will always be individuals who defy our expectations, who challenge our compassion, and remind us how fragile our world really is.
Cases like this, they should make us think critically and push for change. We need to understand mental illness better, advocate for more resources and training, and have open conversations about how to balance individual rights with protecting society from danger.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the disturbing case of Peter Bryan. It's a story that makes us face some uncomfortable truths and grapple with ethical dilemmas. We hope this conversation has made you think about these issues and how we can work towards a safer, more compassionate world. Don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations into the human experience. And let us know your thoughts on this case in the comments.